and welcome to the Force to Freedom podcast, part of the Seeds of Liberty Network. You can find all of our content at theseedsofliberty.com or on Facebook, iTunes, Stitcher, and Twitter. We are welcoming back Lloyd. He has finally come back to Earth from his move.
Yay, in Texas now.
Yay. Probably better off than anywhere in California at this point, because they seem to be spiraling the drain a little faster by the day.
Yeah. Glad I left when I could.
So we're starting off light this week because of the busy schedules. We're just going to comment on some news stuff. And we're going to start off with, and just to set the tone for it, Cecil the goddamn lion.
Man, I gotta say, I've been out of the loop news-wise because, I like my sanity. And this one just tickles me. It really does. My first exposure was when you mentioned it, and I was like, what? And I kind of looked it up, and I just loved the headline on CNN. Beloved lion kills. Hunter says he has regrets.
Right. I don't. There's so many layers on this onion. The problem is that almost all of the layers are stupid. But as the whole thing is kind of stupid, it's, how does one, let's address this and not try to have like a foregone conclusion about it, but let's not wallow in the piss bucket that is this topic anyway.
Okay.
Cecil's a fucking animal. Let's start there.
Yeah, right. So, the fact that Cecil is named, and this is used, and this is the first thing I spotted, was the rhetorical approach used by the media in all the, and just how they framed the news story, right? If this was like an objective news story, it would be lion killed by person in Africa, potentially illegally.
Right.
That would be pretty much it.
Yep.
But no, there's beloved lion killed. Hunter says he has regrets, so it's all feels.
Yep.
It's all feels, and everything's framed in this kind of this statist paradigm of like, ooh, this could impact our tourism, and the country of Zimbabwe is like upset, and and look at all the badness. This guy's a hunter and he takes trophies, and I'm pretty certain as a dentist, number one, he makes a lot of money and that's how he can afford this, and B, this is his thing and he pays for it. And if he did this on by mistake, which seems to likely be the case considering all the other big game he's done has been in accordance with whatever law of the area he's been to, what's the story? Guy makes a mistake. Hurts feels.
Well, I think the biggest people, because there's a bunch of people who are like, you're not going to convince the vegan, vegetarian crowd that killing an animal is okay anyway. And okay, as a rule, they tend to be more against the killing of an animal. Very few people don't eat meat because they don't like the taste. So, I'm not even going to try to address those folks. That's their convictions. It's your world. More meat for me. I'm all about it.
Yeah, absolutely. But I love the vegetarians. They increase the supply.
Yes, they do. So I'm really more looking at the hunters, somebody who are the carnivores and the hunters who really do eat meat, and then have this preferred category of animals that we will kill and animals that we won't kill. Because that doesn't make sense. Killing a lion is the same as killing a cow. Now, granted, there are reasons that you would kill a predator far more than you would kill a domesticated livestock. I don't think anybody's planning on eating the lion.
Probably not. They cut his head off and pretty much left the rest.
And so why one would kill a predator really comes down to, for the same reason a lot of people shoot coyotes, and these large cats. I understand that this was on a preserve, so I don't think this particular animal was going to be harassing humans. But there are plenty of large predatory cats that they dine on actual humans. I know in America, we give our kids teddy bears and stuffed Simba, But but the reality is we live in a world where we can kind of give those things to our kids and not raise them in a world when they see a bear, they think, oh, cuddly.
Yeah, no, not so cuddly. Yeah.
And the,
300-pound black bear will maul you to death.
right. And the personification of the animal doesn't make it a human. I mean, it just has the same impulses that you and I have with our young and pooping and hunger and all of those things, but it doesn't contemplate its own death. It doesn't contemplate the honor, quote unquote, honor in killing, for food or for defense or for sport or whatever. But it isn't even smart enough to not chase a carcass strapped to a Jeep.
Right.
Like, it doesn't understand the concept of it's a trap. So what exactly is this all about? Okay, I'll give you that the guy was baiting an animal, but let's look at it. This animal was elderly. I know that seems strange word to apply to an animal, but a 13-year-old lion is well into his golden years. Even if it's in captivity, they don't really live past 20. I mean, that's like real high numbers. You're really looking at about 15 years, and the lion was 13. So, I mean, is it better to let this animal die out in the wild, and then, oh my God, the pride is going to kill his cubs? Well, if he dies out in the wild, that happens. Or do you infuse $55,000 into the economy of this dirt poor area for the sake of an animal that's going to die in a relatively short period of time anyway? Anybody who wants to liken this to euthanasia is making a huge stretch because they're not human. So I just don't understand any of this, especially when the quote-unquote sportsmen get on the bandwagon.
Right. So, I kind of see that there's like multiple angles from this, that, like I said, my first instinct was to see the rhetorical bullshit from the media.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty much a given now. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things that philosophy gives you is this blessing and curse of not being able to you can't look at the curtain without seeing Oz behind it every time.
Yep.
And so there's that. And then there's the economic aspect, which I might say, interestingly enough and surprisingly, on the CNN webpage, there's actually a small thumbnail to the right of the story where it says, why killing lions like Cecil may actually be good for conservation. A rational economic argument for privatization of animals so that they actually continue to exist? Yeah, a tragedy of the commons. Demonstrated. Interesting, right? It's surprising for me. But so there's the economic aspect. And then there's the political aspect, which is just mind-numbing that it's even in here. But here it is. Zimbabwe has started extradition proceedings and hopes the U.S. will cooperate, says the country's environmental minister. And they're like worried that this will tarnish the image of Zimbabwe and further strain the relationship between Zimbabwe and the USA. And just to get back to the economics just for a second, we're looking at the last country that had rampant hyperinflation and the next country that's probably going to. Mm-hmm. It's just delicious. It's like... But
and in reality, all Zimbabwe is doing is looking to take a human hostage to see what they could get from the United States government for the damn dentist.
Yes, absolutely. It's all self-serving economics. Who can grasp it, whatever resources they can, because nobody is actually making any money. There's so little being produced, especially by some shithole like Zimbabwe. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I just found it was a pathetic and yet hilarious story.
Well, and I'll just cast the open invite that if there's anybody out there who would like to come on the show and make a case that humans and animals are in the same category, where they should be treated the same, and I'm not. Let me be clear. I am absolutely not for just punching an animal. I'm not talking about abuse or anything like that. But the thing about liberty is you have to deal with your asshole neighbor who might like to kick his dog because it's not my dog. And I hate it. I really hate that. But, okay, this guy is not a sportsman. He's a trophy hunter. I get it. He paid 55 grand to a bunch of dirt poor people for the head of a lion that was going to die soon anyway. And I think that's much better of an outcome than not. Let it die in the wild and everybody doesn't get their panties in a wad. And this guy's a shitty hunter. I mean, the way he shot that thing, he had to track it for 2 days. Let's give him at least a little bit of credit. Instead of letting the damn thing go and trying to throw more money at the problem, he actually tracked it for the better part of 2 days to put it down. But he's a shitty marksman. He's a shitty hunter. And all those, the grandiose stories of how he came about his kills that he's been telling all his buddies, they all know he's full of shit now, okay? He's a glorified road hunter. That's it. That's it, and that's fine. But that's all subjective value. It really is your personal preference. I have no problem with road hunting. I'm not a hunter. There's nothing sportsmanlike about killing an animal, but they are delicious. So the fastest way to get that thing from where it's at into my freezer, I mean, the real skill is actually disassembling the animal anyway. Your butcher has a hell of a lot more skill than just about any hunter I've ever met, and I've met quite a few of them. So,
yeah, and I gotta add, I'm salivating at the idea of somebody coming on and equating human beings with, with animals in any form of ethical sense. That right. Is just right. Well, that is the red meat to me, like it is to the lion. Please,
right? It's very. I mean, I've had a couple of people do it in just talks the last couple of days, and it's pure fallacy argument, pure subjectivity. And I mean, a lot of people don't want to admit it, but as far as subjectivity goes, you really need to just keep it to yourself. I mean, you could talk about it, you can have opinions, nobody's saying that, but if you expect your subjective value to be enforced on another human, you are the problem.
Yeah, this is an issue of aesthetics, not
yes.
ethics.
Yes. Yeah.
So, yeah. So I hear Planned Parenthood is also a big deal.
And there's the delicious contrast. Because there's people looking for, quote, less crunchy techniques to remove humans from the womb. And then we can contrast it with hate, rage, and feels. Family members ready to knife each other in the neck over a lion. But at the same table, they will all sit there while dining on lamb and talk about how Planned Parenthood is a positive influence on the sphere of human existence.
Right. So, like, this whole the whole issue, and I'm just backing up and looking at it from a much larger perspective. We're talking about literally millions of human beings, potential human beings at the very worst, potential human beings, right? Yeah. So depending on how you define when this thing becomes a person, sure, the zygotes, a mass of cells. Well, so am I, and I'm animate and sentient and reasoning. So there's some of the difference. But when you look at this thing, you're talking about millions of human beings, and some small people, a group of people, and got to give credit where credit's due. Most of them are religious, are strongly opposed to this for moral and religious reasons. And whereas I don't care about their religious motivations in this, I'm all on the bandwagon with them from a moral standpoint. But then these same people, we have such a much larger demographic that's like worked up about a single lion dying. But, not about however many millions of people are terminated, murdered. That's just mind-bogglingly bad priorities. And just look at this in the West, and taking the West in the grandiose scheme of things. You're looking at Europe right now, which is demographically like shrinking in almost every nation state over there, just shrinking. This is why they have to import all these immigrants and outsiders who are not part of their closed off cultures that are not very accepting of outsiders, and it causes massive problems. Well, hello. If you didn't abort half your fucking population, maybe you would have more than a 1.3 birth rate.
Yep.
I mean, you're going extinct, guys.
Yeah.
You're not even replacing.
Yep.
And, it's just mind-boggling. The West is literally murdering itself gradually. And it's a real tragedy considering, I mean, this is the larger culture that has brought us damn near everything of value that's in the world today.
And so I sat and I had it was about a 3-hour conversation. It wasn't straight 3 hours. It was a Facebook conversation. It was going back and forth, but 3.5 hours of posting back and forth. And literally, finally, I found somebody who was making an abortion argument, for a pro-abortion argument. By the way, for anybody who uses the terms pro-life and pro-choice, you don't know what you're talking about. Life is everything. Life is broccoli. Life is Cecil the lion. Life is, if you're going to say you're pro-life, that means you're pro-mosquito, pro-cancer, and the next time some nasty virus is attacking your body, those antibiotics are genocidal, okay? So you really have to get off that life idea. It's specifically, as a human, you are at the top of the food chain, and you are unique amongst all of all the other species, whether plant, animal on this planet, bacterial. You are unique, and that uniqueness, if you don't want to preserve it for yourself, that's fine, but logically you'd have to kind of start with yourself, right? If you're not interested in preserving it.
Yeah, live your values or don't talk about them.
Right. So this guy actually just didn't fly off the handle, go into some fallacious rage, and actually made an argument. But it came down to the difference, and literally 3 hours, I'll save you the whole read. The difference was person and human. Now, person is admittedly a subset of human, and you can't murder persons, but you can murder humans, or human in the biological sense of, a growing human, a maturating human, the same process by which all of us came to be.
Right.
And I don't know any arbitrary time between a fertilized egg implanting and the time whenever you come to your timely or untimely demise. I don't know of any arbitrary place in there where suddenly the concept of murder would become valid.
Right.
So
I just look at it from the binary of a person versus a potential person. So, what defines a person? That's of utmost importance to find out first before you even go into what is the potential person. Yeah. So, a person's just another animal. We're a human being. But what differentiates the human being as an animal from all other animals, and this ties back to Cecil, is our ability to reason, mm-hmm. and our ability to make consciously aware choices, etc. Right? Not just on instinct, doing everything on instinct. We have happiness and everything else, and some of these things are we can see in higher mammals, mm-hmm. but that ability to think, and to differentiate, between different kinds of concepts. This is really what sets us apart.
Yep.
And I mean, they've had studies where 3-month-olds demonstrate moral reasoning. Mm-hmm. 3-month-olds, which just blows my mind because I don't think I was at that age, but how would I know? I don't remember anything before the age of 4. Yep. and the memories of children are really, really unreliable. But so we have this, person with this definition that we can use. And, I'm not making the best definition here verbally, but we have a definition of person that we can use. And so there's this other thing called the potential person. Now, I've heard also fallacious arguments where, well, that's, you can bring that down to sperm. No, because that's only half the genetic information of what could potentially even be a potential person.
Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely not it. So, every time the woman, sheds an egg, we don't consider that murder. That's
Right.
just biology.
Right.
The guy who has a nocturnal emission,
Right.
that's just biology. It's not, mass murder.
Wet dream for those of you out there who don't know what a
Yeah,
nocturnal emission is.
right.
That's waking up and knowing you have to do laundry that day.
Right. And sadly, I've never had one of those. But I'm lazy, so that's just like that's my wet dream.
Yeah, I haven't in this millennium.
So, being able to have that definition. Okay, so when is that potential person? When does that these combination of cells become a potential person? Well, what defines the person against everything else is that it's their brain, right? And now people don't have full brain maturity until usually somewhere in their mid-20s. So, you're not going to be able to define a person as someone who's reached full brain maturity. Otherwise, you're pretty much going to, you're going to be enabling the murder of everyone under the age of, say, 25.
I don't
So,
know. I was watching MSNBC the other day in a doctor's office, and it seems that number seems to be way higher because even the anchor had really no full brain maturity, and she was well into her 40s. So,
uh, she has done cost benefit analysis at a subconscious level and realized conformity is far more socially beneficial. Uh, and she's has probably a six-figure career, so I imagine she's actually correct in that. If not for her sanity and long-term psychological well-being, then definitely for her pocketbook. But so you have this brain. That's really the thing that sets you apart. Without that, that frontal cortex, we're just another mammal. But that kind of sets us apart. And when that brain forms, the spine forms and it attaches to the brain. All this stuff happens, and I'm no neurosurgeon or anything like that. So, rank amateur, take it for what it's worth, and do your own research on this. I think that's when it happens. I think that's when you go, hey, there's a brain there. Is this heart beating independently under the control of its own brain? Yeah? Okay, well, that's a potential person. So you don't kill potential people because, that's not a good thing. And this, of course, kind of falls in line with, like, most current legislation regarding abortions, Hey, in that, when you got that, you take that after that emergency contraceptive pill, right? Hey, don't let it implant. Or, hey, it's been a couple days. Oh, crap, take that. It's not a big deal. That thing's just a little couple cells attached to the uterine wall. Not a big deal, right? And besides, good Lord, how are you going to stop a person from doing these things? They've had herbal concoctions and all kinds of stuff for millennia that, that help a woman shed an unwanted pregnancy. So, there's a definite difference between, that zygote and the fetus with a brain. And this is exactly the kind of crap that Planned Parenthood wants bits and pieces of. That thing that distinguishes that fetus as a potential person. And you're snuffing the potential, and you're grinding it up, and you're using it for whatever.
And that's kind of where I see the argument take the subjective term, because nobody can really make this. There is no real definable point of person. It's
No,
just not there.
I laid out my best argument.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Whether it's valid or not, I leave that to the neuroscientists.
Right, and that's where I get off. And like, I can't give anybody a definitive person. However, I definitely know that humanity. I mean, maybe not every single person, but as a rule, you will find that humans will risk their life for other humans.
Yeah.
And they a lot of people recognize, and if you don't want to, if you don't want to sacrifice your life for somebody else, that's your business, and nobody could tell you otherwise. But I can tell you that I would step in front of things for my kids, and that's
Yep.
just kind of the way it is. And I can't give anybody a definitive idea of when a person begins, but I can tell you when human begins, because that's a biological process, not a philosophical one.
Yep.
And no, it doesn't begin when the sperm meets the egg, and I'm sure of it, because if I take a sperm and an egg that just happened to be, that fertilized egg is on a sanitary napkin, I can't slap that thing to a telephone pole on my way to work, and then watch it grow over 9 months, and then pick the fucker when it's ripe. It just doesn't work like that. So human is fairly easily a biological definable thing. It has its own DNA strand. It begins at a finite point in time where you can say this egg implanted in the wall, and a miscarriage isn't a murder, and a prevented pregnancy isn't a murder. None of that.
Nope.
But at a certain point, you have created another human. I can't get into personhood, and it's so subjective. I'm not going to waste my time doing it. That's just my feels all over your face, and I don't feel the need to do that to anybody.
Right, but then there's the actual behavior of this organization.
Yes.
So anyone who's really who's defending this is just, oh my God, they're so disconnected from ethics. It's not even funny.
Well, here's the thing, though. I can get on board. I consider those videos a fallacy. Just because something was presented fallaciously doesn't mean that it's not correct. If you want to go and sell your kidneys, go sell your kidneys. If you think that the best way that you could serve your family and friends, and you have these suicidal tendencies, and you're goddamn tired of this planet anyway, and you want to sell yourself off piecemeal, and then have your last supper and go under the knife and be dissected for science and the betterment of others, I don't care. That's your business.
Yeah. That's your body. That's your person.
Right.
That other thing inside you
exactly
is not.
And a lot of people don't. I mean, they don't want to get on board with the feel. Many of the abortion arguments are about feels.
Yeah.
Both sides.
All of them.
Both sides. I understand that the Christians tend to come down on the far more clear, definitive side of humans are dying issue, but a lot of their arguments are just as fallacious as the pro-choice people. I don't know what this choice bullshit is about, but if you ever talk to a pro-choice person, the only thing they think you should have a choice about is abortion.
Yeah, well, the pro-choice, just to get to the rhetoric of it, the pro-choice and pro-life labels, that's advertising.
Yep.
That is not at all their positions. That's the soundbite advertising from Bernays type of propaganda to quite easily divide people and, make them not think about a topic and instead, form tribal affiliations and hurl insults instead of spears. So we've made some progress at each other.
Yeah.
So that's all that is.
We saw all that unravel as soon as the goddamn lion died. So people were calling for the heads of other humans. If you enjoy this, you should be slaughtered like the infidel. Like, Jesus. That escalated quickly.
Yeah. Just completely ridiculous. But I mean, and the worst part of this, though, I have to say, the worst part of this is the fact that this organization, for whom millions of people have a moral objection to, from their conscience, right? This is antithetical to everything that they believe, and they are forced to fund it.
Yep.
Here's the baseline for liberty. If you're forced to pay for something that goes completely against your conscience, regardless of whatever the belief is, you're worse than a slave.
Yep.
Because no one even, the slave masters never made the slaves, worship them as, hey, we're your saviors. No. There was never any doubt about what their role was and what their purpose was. And, you don't have to kiss my ass. You just have to do what I tell you.
Yep.
All right? Not this. This is worse.
Yep.
This is worse. This makes everyone worse than a slave.
And for the people out there who want to say, oh, well, the funding that goes to Planned Parenthood doesn't fund abortions, I understand that in the most very technical sense, you are correct. What I am telling you is that the only reason those doors are open is because they will fund somebody on the staff at, $200 grand a year, a doctor, who performs abortions for, cut rate prices, but then is listed underneath the overall structure as, like a gynecological consultant or something like that. So a lot of it, essentially, it's subsidizing the abortion side of the house. If you were to just take that business and separate them two, Planned Parenthood was the abortion clinic, and all of the other stuff was handled by Parenthood Management Services,
Sure.
then you would see Parenthood Management Services go out of business entirely.
Yep.
But I'm sorry, the abortion clinic couldn't afford to run without charging more.
Yeah, absolutely. And,
So-
and really, the entire existence of this organization is dependent upon ignorance,
Yeah.
economic and ethical.
Yeah.
And the worst part of it is, they're always claiming to serve the minority community.
Yep.
Hello. Their founder was a racist and eugenicist who openly advocated, abortion as a means to cull the black race from the face of the earth. And yet Democrats are like so pro Planned Parenthood, and yet who do you think supports the Democrats the most?
Yep.
The people they're annihilating.
Yep.
And that's the ultimate tragedy.
Yep. It's really sad. I mean, I'm a white guy. It's not like this whole eugenics thing applies to me, but
Yeah.
I go back to human. I don't sit
Yeah.
around and, the Constitution basically said blacks are 2/3 of a person. So if you want to start separating human from person, your argument gets real quickly into slavery.
Yeah.
Basically, let's have a term that encompasses human, but we're going to separate it. We're going to call him Jew. We're going to call him slave. We're going to call him savage. That was the Native American term.
Or we'll call him fetus.
Fetus, yeah. Enemy of the state. All of these are real favorite things to get people on board with an idea, but at the end of the day, the term is just trying to mentally help you separate human from that person. Hey, Palestinian, there's another one.
Yep.
And it's not just our side of the world, it's infidel on the other side of the world.
Yeah.
But humanity is in a really bad habit, calling a human something other than human, and then doing its best to exterminate that preferred group.
And this has to be done. And this is something that so many people don't understand. This has to be done because people naturally recoil from violence against other people.
Yep.
I mean, the subset of people, sociopaths and psychopaths who can do this, who can just go and shoot somebody in the face. I mean, that's a really small subset. Those people are not common, and they typically attain high office. So, this is...
Or they become cops or military. And a little confessional, I'm one of them. I don't recoil at violence. I don't get, I've been around when people are killed, and I understand it's a sad moment, but it's those moments when somebody's got to keep it together, and I'm that guy because it doesn't really bother me that much. So I'm not saying, hey, that's not a promotion. That's just saying I'm one of those weird people that it doesn't bother me. Violence doesn't intrinsically bother me like other people.
Yeah, and I mean, this is something that most people have to be trained into. Exposure. Just it's just like any other thing. Most of the human condition is a matter of environment.
Yep.
So this is this natural revulsion from aggressing against another human being is something we have to train out of each. I mean, and if that isn't going to work, we have to psychologically break down that perception of the other person and focus on the other. And this is something you hear liberal circles in the academy a lot. The othering of it's dehumanization is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
It is dehumanizing. So I mean, this is I mean, and it's easily read. You could just look at the arguments for slavery when they argue strenuously and with really good logic and everything else. I mean, faulty logic, obviously. Yeah. But the arguments are really powerful and everything, and very well thought out and structured, and it's all for the purpose of just removing the human aspect from that person with dark skin that you want to put a chain around.
Yep.
and make do work for you.
Yep.
It's all it is. And same thing, you want those little bits of yummy fetal brain matter or whatever. You gotta get rid of that human thing. Otherwise, everyone would just be like, oh, recoil in horror from this.
Yep. And if we were talking about miscarriages, I really wouldn't have any argument with people about making the best of the unfortunate circumstance and studying that tissue. I understand, but let's call it what it is. We're doing an autopsy. We're not doing groundbreaking research. Okay, I mean. I love how you just, as soon as you call it groundbreaking research, all of a sudden people get on board like, ooh, science, like, oh, atrocity.
Yeah, and the worst part of that is, well, aside from the ethics, you can look at Pew Research studies on the American understanding of science. Yeah, huge numbers of Americans are hugely in favor of science, and the vast majority don't know a damn thing about it. Yep. Not even of the disciplines, but of the method.
Yep.
It's just basics.
There's people. Let's flip back to the animals. There's 4 Northern White Rhinoceroses left in the world, and this is a tragedy, right? Well, the difference between a Northern White Rhinoceros, of which there are 4, and the Southern White Rhinoceros, of which there are 20,000 plus, is some distinction that not even all of the biologists are interested in getting on board with.
Yeah, it's a subspecies.
Right, it's a subspecies of a nonsensical definition that environmentalists can latch a hold of and play political games with.
Right, and that's exactly all it's for, too.
Yep, so whenever you hear there's only 4 Northern White Rhinos left, maybe you should start a campaign to get some of the southern ones to move north.
Right.
Because there's a whole shitload of them down in South Africa. Maybe if we can get some of them to go north, we wouldn't have this,
North are Democrat states. You don't want to do that. Then the rhinos will be entering, economically deprived areas, and they might starve.
Speaking of which, from what I could tell from as you've described to me, Lloyd, the normal Texas human isn't doing as well as the Central Texas human. So you might want to come on down to the Austin area. If you can handle the smell of patchouli from 4 miles away, it's really not that bad. And the food is amazing down these parts. I'm just saying.
Not the patchouli, man. I used to live in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Oh, okay. So you're already amassed. You're immune to it at this point. You're fine. We don't have that level.
No, it already burned out my sinuses when I was 18 and in Berkeley. So yeah. But it's hilarious because I've been listening to a number of podcasts and doing some reading when I have the time on Aristotle and some of his other works. Most people understand him, his work regarding ethics and the formulation of logic and stuff like that, which is all amazing. But how many people understand that he was also the first one to put forward the biological classification system for animals that stood for 1,000 years, was not improved upon for 1,000 years until Linnaeus, and even he would have been able to say it's a white rhino. That's kind of where it ends. The southern or northern makes no difference. That's a subspecies. This gets into the environmental false arguments of, you hear this touted all the time. Every minute, 7 species go extinct. No, subspecies. Yeah. And you know what? How many of those are caused by humans? Very, very little. Right. How many just happen that you don't even know about?
Right.
Many.
And that's assuming that the natural circle and the natural order of things is that the dominant predator in an area doesn't naturally make things go extinct. Which I would argue is the exact cause, that's the exact pattern of life on Earth.
Yeah, totally. It just happens. They've just demonstrated in recent news that some chimpanzees in a given area are hunting certain other animals in that area to extinction. They don't have spears and, slingshots or bow and arrow. They're just killing anything they can get their hands on to eat it. And the Native Americans and everything, and the Filipinos and the mountain tribes, they do the same thing. There was never a noble savage that was in harmony with his environment.
Yep.
That doesn't exist.
I'm waiting for one of those southern white rhinos to wander into Johannesburg and be declared the only urban white rhino left. We've
Right?
discovered a new subspecies of white rhino, and there's only one left.
And that southern species of white rhino in Johannesburg is wearing Beats by Dr. Dre on its ears because it's urban. So,
Oh man,
but
just out of curiosity, I had to do some digging this week, and I'm the only person I know who is not being paid to promote this website. It's called logicalfallacies.info. For those of you who will say, "Oh, we're both mammals, therefore we both have the same palette of rights," that's called a weak analogy. I had to go look it up because I knew that's fallacious reasoning. When you take biological characteristics and then you attribute philosophical characteristics on that same basis, that's called a weak analogy. That's a fallacy. It's not real. So sorry to preemptively break all those hearts. I actually got Facebook blocked for that. All I really said was no, and I put the link to that, and yeah, that got me a block from some feely left anarchist.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, just because you use a fallacy, you incur a fallacy in your argument, doesn't mean your argument's necessarily wrong.
Yep.
It just means the way you're arguing there is either not good, or it's it's leading you potentially to an erroneous conclusion.
Right.
So just clear that up there. Just because someone uses a fallacy doesn't mean their argument's invalid. It just means it's a sloppy argument, and you need to do better work.
Right. Well, going back to valid and unsound, you could make a valid argument using a fallacy, but it will not be sound argument. And the goal is to be sound argument. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, we've done it in a previous show, but I mean, you could just go read online. The difference between validity is having it in the correct logical format. Sound is when placed in the correct valid logical format, the statement is true.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's demonstrably true.
You will find we don't do a whole lot of speculation and feels around here. We work with objective stuff because wasting your time with what is basically just an opinion. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it isn't your favorite flavor of ice cream. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I find aesthetics interesting, but it's not worth arguing about.
Yes, absolutely. I still have opinions and I still have favorite foods. I just don't waste anybody else's time with it unless they ask.
Yeah, not so much. So this brings us, I guess, without a segue, to our last. I really tried hard with the last segue, but not this time. I'm phoning it in. The feds are investigating the University of Phoenix for possible unfair business practices. Oh, and I might add, this is via Alexandra Samuels from the University of Texas at Austin.
Oh, no, this is a fallacious town. I didn't say nothing about that. That goes with Patchouli. We should get a government-funded study to see the direct correlation between the amount of patchouli someone is exposed to and the amount of fallacy in their arguments. I see a high correlation.
So I'm reading this one from USA Today and .com, of course, and it is just hilarious. So, University of Phoenix, for anybody who has had their head stuck in the proverbial toilet of the state education system for the last 20 years or so, is an online college primarily, and it's under investigation by the U.S. Federal Trade Commission for potentially deceptive or unfair business practices. So according to what is going down here, the University of Phoenix has reportedly collected more than $488 million in tuition and fees for veterans, which is kind of dwarfs every other institution identified as a GI recipient by the Veterans Affairs Department. So the big problem is they're like, hey, you guys attract a lot of low-income students who then take out large amounts of financial aid. And, these students, they end up with a lot of debt. and because even after graduation, and that makes it difficult to repay, and that's why they're being investigated for unfair business practices. Yeah, got any words for that, Donnie?
Well, so the article is selling this as a for-profit college problem.
Uh-huh.
When in reality, this has nothing to do with the profit status. You could put this to non-profit status or anything like that. And, if this is going back to state schools, the same problem exists. So it's really kind of framed to make you think that if somebody's making money off of educating other people, that this is the problem. It's really more of a for-profit college problem. And I'm just kind of looking at the depths of this. I wouldn't doubt, like I could tell you firsthand, the University of Phoenix is a big deal for the GI Bill.
Yeah.
Tons and tons of people going to the University of Phoenix. Well, when they get out of the military and they become unemployed and homeless, it not only does it look bad on the military because they got this homeless vet running around, but now they find out he's got a 4-year degree that they paid for, and I think there's a little taste in that where they're looking into the University of Phoenix because if you haven't been in the military, let me just tell you, it's pretty easy to get college credits, and they will very favorably value your military transcript to give you credits. And University of Phoenix is one of the more liberal ones that will give as much as they can.
Yes.
But
and that's what makes it attractive to vets.
Right, but based on a 4-year degree put together with this hodgepodge of quasi skills, I wouldn't necessarily expect to find yourself in a good position for a job when most of the college credits that you were evaluated on were essentially a lie because they apply to your military life as opposed to civilian life, and they are pretty different.
And so just some facts for all this. So the majority of the stuff that you're going to get coming out of the military that goes towards your college credits are going to go towards all of those undergraduate credits.
Yep.
All the ones that the system forces on you through their licensing and everything else arrangements. In order to get that degree, you have to go through, biology and calculus and all these other things, even though what you're really interested in is just, archaeology or something, right? They make you go through all this other stuff, including English lit, of course, where all the good Marxists hang out, so that you can get this technical degree or this other degree. So this, say I got 9, I think, credits out of my military service, and I think it was health and physical fitness and just garbage stuff. Well, this went against my electives basically,
yep.
For which I already had buttloads, so I didn't even need it. So that was just that was just icing on the cake. So this is how those are typically applied. Now, if you went through 2 years of electronics school before you even saw a ship or a unit or something, you're probably going to have a hell of a lot more degree credits, and those are probably actually going to be applicable. But
were you throwing that at me?
Just in general.
No, because the 2 years of I got 106 credits.
See,
for
there
my
you
transcript.
go.
But I do have 5 MOSs.
Right.
2 years of electronics school being one of them. So.
Right, and one of my cohorts back in my Navy days was a nuclear engineer. So you can imagine he didn't have a great deal to do in his actual field to finish to get his degree. Yeah. He had to take care of all this stupid Marxist shit. Because none of that stuff applied to his, liberal arts aspect of his degree. But also, just to put this in perspective, in the 2014 to 25 school year, the average cost of tuition was $31,000 per year at private colleges.
Yep.
$9,139 for state residents at public colleges, and I almost find that hard to believe. And $23,000 rounded off for out-of-state residents attending public universities. So just to bring this home, the student loan debt in the United States is now over $1 trillion. And most of these students aren't going to the University of Phoenix. So what's that tell you? That most most colleges and most of the students going to those colleges, due to the nature of why higher education is so expensive, and I encourage everyone to go to learnliberty.org to see some awesome videos on this subject. Um, People are getting themselves in debt regardless of the venue they take. If they want to go into higher education and get a degree, they're going to go into debt for the most part.
Yep.
Here's the real bad thing. What did they not say in the investigation of University of Phoenix? What's the graduation rate? Because nationally, less than 50% of people attending public universities graduate. So that debt that they incur is completely wasted. Mm-hmm. And this is, and the metric there is how many people graduate with a 4-year degree within 6 years. Less than half. And college professors throughout the academy are complaining that all their students have to go back and take remedial courses for content material that they should have learned in high school. So, maybe blaming and pointing the finger or putting the magnifying glass over University of Phoenix is kind of misallocation of resources.
Yeah, and I mean, the way the feds are looking at it, this is a political organization who's looking to not ever take the blame for anything that it's ever done, let alone the second and third order effects of its blame. And then it's not looking to blame the people who have made these decisions. Somebody who borrowed $60,000 for a college degree, and now they have this worthless degree because they were told, hey, you could be a marine biologist and swim with dolphins. Come to find out, the market's only going to tolerate about, 400 of those people, maybe 5 in the country out of 310 million, and, I'm going to go swim with dolphins when I grow up. No, you're not.
Now, I will say this. The University of Phoenix only has a 5% graduation rate as of 2010. Now, I will also say this. That 5% graduation rate, you have to look at access. So this is something that the government's been pushing for literally decades.
Yep.
More and more access. We got to get the underprivileged. We got to get the poor. We got to get... Back in the 50s and 60s, this was not the case, and the graduation rate was phenomenally high.
Yep.
And there's a reason for this. You just go ahead and look at a bell curve of human intelligence. That's why. You don't want people going to college who have a median IQ of like 110.
Yep.
They're really not likely to do well. Or if they do, they're going to probably end up teachers.
And even if they manage to do well and get out the other side, all you've done is flood the market with degrees of people who normally wouldn't be able to afford it. And I'm not saying that the system should be designed to keep people down, nor should it be enhanced to prop people up. It should just be is what it is. And by shuffling everybody into, if you're out there and you got a 4-year degree and you can't get a job, it's because the market is flooded with degrees.
Right.
And that's partially by, and here we are, going towards the Fed again, but, low interest rates on money makes money cheap and causes malinvestment. One of those malinvestments, whether people want to admit it or not, might be a 4-year degree.
Right. And right now, nearly 40% of working age Americans hold a college degree. Yeah. That's this is basic laws of supply and demand.
Yep.
What happens to the value of that degree when 40% of the population has one too? It goes down by, pretty much equal percentage. So that degree that the guy in 1966 got in, petroleum engineering, which FYI is the highest paying 4-year degree you can pretty much get, that the value of that guy's degree, number one, phenomenal, because he had a much better education coming out of the colleges back then, and it's a technical degree in a hard science, compared to the ones nowadays where the standards are just lowered, and there's more of them. So you get, the difference in value is completely off kilter. And worse than that, the number of those is gone completely off kilter. So you have just the worst of all of all factors taking effect on people's lives here,
Yep.
and because of the myth of the of education being your bulwark against poverty
Yep.
and a bad life, more and more people are into it, and it's just sucker punching the entire middle class.
Yep. The nature of education has changed. The guy who worked two jobs and still went to school and had the aptitude to do it and did it, even though he didn't get any good money or any loans or anything like that to go, that individual was quality on the other side.
Yep.
And that, even though he didn't have that financial, um, that the ease of finances getting through college, he still managed to do it anyway because that guy kind of needed to do that. The guy who can just show up with a check, hey, I'm going to go into debt for 50 grand and we'll see how this works out. You
Right.
cannot make long-term financial decisions like that. For as much as I understand the system has kind of screwed people into believing something, they've also got to take a little bit of responsibility for their own actions. Of I never bothered to understand why I was getting a degree. I just took all of this on face value. I didn't really question anything, and now I've got $700 a month of school loan to pay back, but I can't make my rent.
Right. And it has to be stated, decades ago, school's a hell of a lot cheaper. But it
Yep.
was a hell of a lot cheaper because a
Yep.
lot fewer people were able to get in
Right.
because it was far more picky.
Right.
I mean, you didn't get in with, to Harvard unless you had like a 1200 SAT or whatever the hell the number was. They had
Yep.
standards, man.
Yep.
They're not accepting the, 40th percentile. They're
Yep.
taking the 95th percentile.
Yep.
Now, not so much. Now it's just a money-making endeavor, and primarily at the behest of the state.
Yep. Without all that really cheap state money, these you wouldn't see the what the professors are making, what the dean is making, even what
Oh
the
yeah.
football coaches. I mean, the football coach is
Oh
the
yeah.
highest paid guy on
Easy.
campus, but you would not see that kind of money floating around if it was not all based off this free money that we printed out of thin air and told everybody they could borrow at a very cheap rate.
Yeah. I mean, like look at the, University of California, Berkeley, UC Berkeley, back in the '60s. Go ahead and take a look at online photos of it. It was not a very it, it was a university. It was a kind of a spread out campus of makeshift buildings. Uh, but nowadays, these are palaces to the academy. They're academic palaces because all the money that is flooded in them. And yeah, when you're looking at you know, a liberal arts teacher making 80 grand a year, teaching, big air quotes on teaching her students, basically just Marxism
Mm-hmm.
and producing no value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're exactly. I mean, and not to really bust anybody's balls, but a very serious question. Where do you think your gender studies degree is going?
Yeah.
I mean, seriously. Like, do you think the HR department is going to hire you to be like your the compliance manager for gender biases or something? Like, I don't even understand where a degree like that goes.
Yeah, it goes straight into the academy.
Right.
But that also becomes such a highly competitive position because
Yes.
they're really easy classes. All you have to do is agree with the professor and you pass.
Mm-hmm.
And you can just look at and just to go on a tangent, just look at the average amount of grades that are given out. Back in the 60s, if you were to get an A, that was quite an achievement.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, the professors had standards. Even the Marxist professors had standards.
They did.
And not anymore. Now 80% of college students are pulling down.
Was the end of the show due to some technical problem that we had, which still remains a bit of a phantom. At 59 minutes and 6 seconds, everything just dropped off. So you got the basic crux of it. There was nothing really, just a little more conversation. It was only 2 or 3 minutes, and then I would say what I normally would say. Thanks for tuning in. You can catch all of our content on theseedsofliberty.com and on Facebook, Stitcher, iTunes, and Twitter. Thanks for tuning in next week, and hopefully we'll be able to nail down that glitch. Have a good one.